Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jayatri Das, Chief Bioscientist at the Franklin Institute. And I'm thrilled to be joined by a couple of my colleagues today. And we're going to be talking about some of the information that is floating around out there about COVID-19, because here in Philadelphia, we are on the cusp of moving to a new phase of managing this crisis where businesses are starting to think about opening up. People are starting to move around a lot more. And as some of the social restrictions are getting eased up here, there are a lot of questions about how to process all of the information that we're seeing out there and how to make sense of it to help us make decisions about what we do. And no matter what kind of a crisis, it's a challenging time when there's a lot of information to process. Often it's because the situation is changing rapidly. Often it's because there are social values or personal values that weigh in on how we perceive that information. And sometimes there are external forces too that are trying to shape the narrative for different purposes. A couple of weeks ago, my two colleagues on my science team, Derek and Rachel, joined me to talk about some strategies to evaluate information. And we're going to revisit those strategies today. But to put those strategies to the test, I brought in two of my colleagues who are not scientists to help model how we can use this way of thinking to process some of the information that we're hearing out there. So Katie Ozek is our digital marketing and analytics manager, and Kelly Buchan is our director of membership. So you guys are hearing information from lots of different sources. Before we dive into some of these ideas, how are you guys feeling these days with this whole glut of information coming at you? Katie, do you want to go first? Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot of emotions around this whole time period. And I think it's scary and hard to sort of decipher what is true and what is wrong and what is right, especially because it is changing every day. And so our experts that we're turning to don't know all the answers. And so it opens a lot of doors for a lot of things that aren't correct or that sound cool in the moment but don't actually work. So it's just a lot of emotions out there, I think.
And you see stuff, in all the work that you do around social media, you're getting it from all sides.
Oh yeah, all the time.
What about you, Kelly?
I mean, I agree. I think there's a lot to kind of take in and evaluate on our own. I think it's going to get harder, honestly. And I think there's going to be more in the coming weeks as we do move to different phases. Some of the decisions early on were made for us just by kind of shutting down and, basically making it so there's nowhere to go and stuck in our houses. And, you can't go into a store without a mask. But as things start to open up and things, we're making decisions about what we're going to do, especially in the summer when people want to be out. I think there's fear. I definitely have fear of, the whole asymptomatic piece of it is particularly scary as we talk to our loved ones who are older and whatnot.
Yeah, I think you guys both just made some really good points. One of the things, Kelly, that you mentioned is that there aren't necessarily black and white answers for what you should or shouldn't do. There's a lot of risk assessment involved, and we've talked about how humans aren't necessarily good at assessing risk. And also to your point, it's not just the risk to yourself, but the risk to the people around you. And that risk assessment is going to be different from person to person. And so, Katie, you mentioned that, A, we don't have all the answers yet, and B, for the answers that we do have, it's a lot of shades of gray. So we thought we'd try and tackle some of the ideas that are floating out there. And to put a little bit of a spin on this, we thought we'd talk about whether they're truth, fiction, or something in between. So for everybody out there joining us online, play along with us. Send us your questions for about information that you've heard, and tell us what you think. And hopefully this will help us clear up some of the questions, but also help all of us feel a little bit more equipped to think critically and make decisions. Okay, so let's talk about what our categories are for our information. And we're gonna broadly categorize whether each statement is true, which means we've got solid evidence to support it, whether it's false, which means that it's based on some kind of scientific misconception. And we know that there's a ton out there because people have heard a lot of things about science and are trying to connect the dots, except sometimes those dots don't always connect. And then specifically to some of the things that we're talking about now, we talked about two other kinds of misinformation. One is what we call the hot information, which is that as information is coming out, there are statements out there that could be true, but it's too early to tell right now. We need more evidence before we can say something definitively. So we're going to call that category hot information. And then there's what I like to think of as just bad information, which is information that is deliberately misleading and is often put out by people who are trying to manipulate an audience, for politics or profit or various other motivations, but that there's a specific intention to mislead. So those are our four categories: true, false, hot, and bad. And let's remind ourselves the strategies that we're going to use to evaluate this information. So I like to have my handy whiteboard here, and Kelly and Katie, you guys can help me walk through what each of these mean. So let's start with the S. I love this tool because the SCAM acronym is just so easy to remember. So our S stands for source. Kelly.
Yeah, so source is where we're hearing the information from, whether it's who wrote about it or who is delivering the information. Are they qualified do they have the background to make a qualified representation of the information? And is there any conflict of interest involved in what they're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And when we think about this, there are a couple of layers of sources we can think about too. It's, if you're getting it from a friend or a family member on social media, they can be a source, but what's the ultimate source of that information? So kind of doing your homework to track back what the original source is. All right, the C is for the claim. Katie, walk us through that one.
So the claim is what the article or the information is and trying to say. What is the author trying to get through with this particular article? And are there other experts that are corroborating it in the same article, or is it just by that one echo chamber?
That's right. So thinking about, what is the broader argument that's being made, and is it isolated to this one thing, or is there supporting sources for it? So all coming together from a couple of different places. So you put those two together and you think about what the argument this author is trying to make. So what's the rationale by which this person is trying to make you believe the claim? And we know that, especially when it comes to bad information, there are a lot of logical fallacies that come into play, including fake experts or, impossible expectations or cherry picking data that can make things seem more believable than they actually are. And so you put all those together and you get to the M, which is to make a decision as to whether the argument is valid, and then also whether you're questioning your own biases. So we talked about how values come into play in terms of how we process information. And one thing that we've learned from psychology, and I think we've all experienced this ourselves, is that we're more likely to believe things that fit into what we already think. So always try to, question yourself too, in addition to questioning what you're reading. All right, you guys ready?
So let's go.
Okay, true, false, hot, or bad. Okay, so first one, and I've got little handy sheets here with each claim. So our first one is going to be the idea that you can gargle salt water or vinegar to kill the virus. we've seen this out there suggesting that, again, saltwater vinegar could maybe kill the virus before it gets in your system or before symptoms show. So true, false, hot, or bad?
Kelly, why don't you take this one first and then I'll.
I think I'm going to go with bad.
Okay, Katie, what do you think?
Okay. I was actually kind of leaning towards true, just because I don't really know natural remedies or things of that nature, and so it could easily be something that people do and it works. I don't know about it, so yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
Okay. So I would say that this is false, but from a scientific perspective, it's false. I think it could be bad, but I actually haven't seen it coming from a source that is intentionally trying to mislead. You know, it could just be from people who are trying to get clicks on social media. So maybe it could be for profit there. But I think my inclination is to go with false here.
And I actually said bad because, and I wasn't thinking about for profit, but was thinking it might be dangerous. Like, could that maybe make you sick if you don't, like, could that make you sick if you ingest too much straight vinegar or salt water?
So that's a really good point. There are a lot of subtleties here. And I would say, salt water and vinegar, on their own are not terribly toxic. Unless you're consuming large quantities of it. But if you're just swishing it around in your mouth, it's not going to hurt you. But one of the things that science communicators have been thinking about is trying to understand where these ideas come from and why people want to believe them. And for this one, we want to think that it's because people want to feel like there's something that they can do, to protect themselves. But in this case, the science is that the virus is so small. And it attaches to these receptors in the cells in your throat and your nose, and the idea of gargling is just not going to protect you from that initial step of getting infected. Okay.
All right.
So
no gargling tonight for me. Okay.
Yeah. This is the thing is that ultimately, like if you're exposed, the things that we know matter is how long you're exposed and what dose of the virus you're exposed for. So the longer you spend with an infected person, the more virus that they happen to be shedding is going to determine whether you get infected or not. But there's very little that you can do other than wear a mask to protect yourself and of course stay home and keep your distance. All right, let's talk about our second one. And this one I've been seeing a lot of because there's again, looking for ways to protect yourself. So cannabidiol, or CBD, is a compound that's derived from the marijuana plant. It's not the compound that actually causes the high, that's THC. But CBD has been showing some promise for treating, other diseases or symptoms, not necessarily of COVID. So do CBD products actually help cure COVID? True, false, hot, or bad?
Why don't you take that one first, Katie?
Okay. My inclination is honestly to say bad, solely because a couple of factors. One, I think cure is a pretty hard word right there, and I feel high doubt that is actually the case. And two, anything that involves taking smoke into your lungs if you're already sick with it feels like a dangerous activity to try. So I feel like all around that's not a great idea. So
what about you, Kelly?
I was leaning towards hot, just because I think CBD products are just hot in general right now. People are promoting lots of different uses for it, for them. But I could also see, but sort of also thinking bad, just because it's definitely saying something like that is generating a profit for somebody.
Yes, I love the way you guys are applying this scam. critical thinking, and hopefully everybody out there, send in your guesses too, because we're interested to hear what you think. And I think that right now I would go with Katie's first, that it's bad, because you really thought about the claim that we're making. Is that the claim is that it can be cured. And we know that right now there's just nothing that can cure COVID. But Kelly, it is hot too. You're right. So CBD is getting put into all different kinds of products. It's not just products that are inhaled. So whether it's pills, whether it's food, whether it's creams and lotions and oils, there's all sorts of stuff out there. But the problem is that we actually don't have a good base of evidence to say whether it's true or not. And, there are other symptoms with, whether it's addiction, whether it's anxiety, that, CBD does have some medicinal impact on. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that it could, especially when we think about the inflammation that comes with COVID, that maybe there's a mechanism by which CBD could interface with the immune system, but we just don't know that yet. So it's definitely hot in terms of we need more evidence, but in that vacuum, there are bad actors that are stepping in to try and make a profit off of that before we know the truth.
Sure, yeah.
So, as you can tell, this is complicated. It's going to be a lot of yes and. All right, next one. This is one that we've been hearing a lot, which is the idea that wearing a mask can cause carbon dioxide poisoning because you inhale too much carbon dioxide. So, true, false, hot, or bad? Again, everyone out there in the audience, let us know what you've heard and what your thoughts are. Kelly, you want to take this one first?
Sure. I'm gonna go with false on that one. I guess I'm just not apt to believe that the number one thing that we're being told to do could potentially hurt us.
What about you, Katie?
I'm in the exact same boat as Kelly. I feel like doctors wouldn't be telling us to do this if it was actually damaging to our health. I will say, though, I don't have the right answer, so I'm looking forward to what you're going to say, because I've seen this on social a lot, and I really want to jump into conversations and be like, that's not how that works. But I don't actually know how it works. So very excited to get the answer.
Yeah, so false, I think, is the right category for this, because it is based on, I think what people have heard is that, when we breathe oxygen in and we breathe carbon dioxide out. So surely if we're covering up our faces, that means, are we trapping that carbon dioxide? And then are we then breathing it back in? So there's, at a certain level that kind of seems logical. I think what's hard for people to grasp is actually how small oxygen and carbon dioxide molecules really are, and how easy it is for them to just go in and out through the mask. These are even smaller than a virus, even in and out through the sides of a mask for the masks that most of us are wearing. So the probability that you would get to such low oxygen levels that it would actually affect your body is pretty non-existent. And what's great is I've also seen a number of doctors out there who, as we all know, medical professionals and other essential workers are wearing masks all the time to protect themselves. And they're, by and large, unless they have other pre-existing conditions, they're doing just fine. But the proof, and I think this speaks to your point, Katie, is, well, how do we know? And the best way to know is with an instrument called a pulse oximeter that measures the level of oxygen in your blood. And so there have been, I've seen some great information sharing from doctors who actually show their pulse oximetry readings over the course of the day to show that, even as they're wearing a mask and other protective equipment all day long, their oxygen levels are still at a normal, healthy level.
Is that something you get on Amazon? Is this like an Amazon purchase we can make for person?
Yeah, you should be able to. I haven't checked lately. There might be, we might have supply chain issues there. Because
True.
obviously,
Okay.
In this environment, it's one of the home tools that, especially for patients who are at high, or people who are at higher risk, you can have at home to monitor yourself when you have COVID. So I know it's a popular instrument for people to have right now. So you may or may not be able to get one.
All right, good to know.
But it's a very simple thing. It's just an instrument that clips onto your finger. You may have had this, when you go to the doctor's office, that they just check the level of oxygen in your blood.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
That being said, I wanted to do explore this one a little bit further, because I actually just got a question from somebody else that I was talking to, asking about wearing the mask during exercise, and I know that's on a lot of people's minds, which is sort of like, maybe it's not carbon dioxide poisoning, but it's really uncomfortable, and does it matter? And the answer is, of course, yes, it matters, because, especially if you're exercising in a place where you're coming into contact with other people, you want to have that, protection for both you and others as much as possible. I've, seen some data suggesting that, exercising with a mask on is kind of like exercising at a higher elevation. That, you're going to huff and puff and, and work a little bit harder. But again, not to the degree that it puts you in any danger. So if you do get to a point where you feel dizzy or lightheaded, stop, stop what you're doing, take a break. But theoretically, it doesn't change your oxygen levels to a degree that your body can't adjust to it.
I wouldn't be able to tell the
Jayatri,
difference.
like that was my excuse for not being hardcore exercise right now. You just took it away.
Sorry,
I don't know what to
Katie.
do now.
I huff and puff without a mask, so I don't know.
So,
True story.
Definitely, keep those masks on, if you're exercising when, in a place where you're likely to be in contact with others. Okay, let's move on to our next one here. Drinking alcohol can protect you from infection. True, false, hot, or bad? Katie, you want to take this one first?
I mean, it sounds like a cool thing. That would be great if it was true. But again, I feel like it's something that doctors would have prescribed a long time ago for a myriad of things. If it actually worked, I think it can make you maybe feel a little better in the moment during crazy quarantine. But I'm gonna go with a false on this one. So.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Well, wouldn't that be wonderful if it were true? We could all easily protect ourselves from COVID-19. I'm going to go with false as well. It just doesn't sound. It just doesn't sound right.
Absolutely, you're right here, and I like how you're thinking about the sources that you're getting it from, and what other sources should be corroborating it if it were true. But again, I want to talk about kind of the thinking that might have led to this. Becoming a popular idea, which is that it is, we've heard how, hand sanitizer can kill the virus, right? And, how you need hand sanitizer with at least 70% alcohol to kill the virus. And we know that, alcohol has been used to kill bacteria. And so if we drink it, doesn't it work? And again, sadly, if only it were that easy, right? So if you're talking about viruses or bacteria on surfaces, yes, using an alcohol-based cleaning spray or hand sanitizer can absolutely kill the virus. But let's think about the science of how it actually infects us. It comes in through our nose and our mouth and our airways. If you drink it, it goes straight into your stomach. So it doesn't actually come into contact with where the virus is actually affecting the body. So again, I can see where that confusion is coming from. And so just thinking through a little bit more of the logic about where the virus is infecting you and what happens to anything you consume is just two different pathways in our bodies.
So, Jayatri, to follow up with that, potentially odd question, but if you did have a totally different virus that was in your stomach, would it work then? Because it's great.
Probably not.
Okay. I had to ask.
If you think about, other viruses that affect that infect your stomach, thinking about some of like the norovirus or things like that, then you have it's a whole systemic thing that just based on the mechanism of infection. It's not as it's the stomach, your body does a great job at just breaking things down anyway. You don't need alcohol to help. You've got,
It does help,
so
but
much
not in that
strong,
way.
so much strong acid in your stomach that alcohol is not going to make a difference as to whether something in your stomach infects you or not.
Got it. Understood. Thank you.
Your stomach is a great place to just break things down.
Yeah.
All right, here's another one that I think we're all thinking about what might happen as we start to go out. What about the idea that staying at home can actually weaken your immune system? True, false, hot, or bad?
That's a really interesting one because, you think about, talking about, exposure to things can help to
Right.
boost your immune system. So I don't know. I hadn't actually heard that one before. Makes some sense to me. So I might go with there's some truth to that.
Okay, what about you, Katie?
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I feel like, but I also feel like this is another one of those nuanced kind of statements. I think it depends on the level of damage we're talking about. I think that if you stayed home all the time for years upon years upon years, your immune system would be really shot. And that's not something that you want to do because, as Kelly said, you absolutely do want to have interaction with, other people and other things because that affects your immune system positively sometimes. But I think from a small period of time, maybe not, but I'm going back and forth in my head right now, actually. I'm going to agree with Kelly and say true, because even if it's not detrimental, I think it still has some truth in there, so.
All right, well, way to analyze the claim here. So as the claim as stated would be false.
Okay.
That in terms of the, staying at home for even for a couple of months is not enough to significantly affect our immunity in terms of exposure to other germs, because we build up the immunity in our immune system over a lifetime. So even though, like you said, Katie, like, if for some, other reason that you're immunocompromised and you have to stay away from other people, other environments, yeah, then your immune system isn't being exposed to the germ that would help you diversify your protective molecules. But this type of, just being at home for a couple of months isn't going to change that one way or another. But
Good to know.
But where there is some truth to it is the fact that just staying at home for a lot of people, is not a time to just sit home and relax. There's a lot of stress involved, whether it's because, the economic impact or, you or somebody else in your household or in your family has been affected with COVID. There's a lot of stress at this time. And stress is something that does weaken the immune system. So even though staying at home in and of itself isn't going to have a detrimental impact, recognizing that there are other factors at this time that can weaken your immune system is important to think about. And and doing things like exercising and finding ways to take care of yourself is really important to just, to help you respond, as and stay as healthy as you can.
I think we actually have a blog post about that.
I think we do. I was lucky enough to have an awesome graduate intern from the University of Pennsylvania this spring, and she did some great research on writing that up. So to help everybody out, so maybe we'll look that up and post a link to that in the comments for future reference. All right, we've got another idea about face masks here. Face masks can actually help with pollen allergies. True, false, hot, or bad?
I can go. I would say true. I have pretty severe pollen allergies, and one of the only things that we've been able to do outside of our homes and feel a little bit freer is to sit in parks and go places where, it's outside, and I think I've had less allergies than I normally would with it.
Yeah, I would agree with Kelly. I do think this is true, mainly because my husband actually has like a covering that he's worn for years while doing yard work. And if he didn't wear it, he would have severe allergy attacks regularly. So I do think that it has an impact.
Yes, you're right. This is true. So it's a nice, great, side effect of, being able to wear masks is that for those who do suffer from allergies, it does help.
They make one for our eyes, because that would really help me out.
Just don't walk around outside. Crash into everything.
Not good.
But so I want to just reflect on a couple of different things here. One is a little bit of the science behind it. So all of the masks that we wear, we've heard a lot about the size of the particles that they can block. So obviously something like a N95 respirator mask is also going to be the most effective at blocking out the smallest pollen particles. But even a surgical mask, or even like our homemade cloth masks, because most pollen grains are pretty big, especially when we think about it compared to a virus, any of those are going to help with most kinds of pollen. It's, different plants do have different sizes of pollen grains, and once you get really teeny tiny, then, all bets are off. But for the most of the ones that you encounter every day, any of these masks are going to make a difference. The other thing that I noticed that both of you thought about in evaluating that statement was your own personal experience. And I think that's a really great example of how, just being able to test a hypothesis and observe a phenomenon for yourself is always like the best way to, to think scientifically. And that's the challenge with a lot of these other statements is, especially with viruses, it seems, so hard to imagine because we can't see it. And, and so many of us so far have been lucky enough, not to be affected by it. And so again, when that risk feels removed from you, it's harder to assess that risk. And so what both of you just talked about in terms of having a very personal risk in front of you that we can assess exactly what that impact might be. That's a great example, and hopefully we can find ways to encourage people to think about that scientific method of thinking and analyzing evidence, even if it's not quite so personal.
Kelly, we're thinking scientifically.
I know, I love it.
Great. All right, and then our last one that we're going to talk about here, talk about things projecting into the future where we don't have evidence yet, right? A COVID vaccine might not work forever. True, false, hot, or bad?
Katie, you want to go first? Are you still thinking?
Sure. I'm probably gonna have to say hot to that because there's no way to know the information right now. And I mean, flu vaccines change yearly. That's why we're getting them every year. So I think that because vaccines tend to mutate, that's something that we'll have to consider going forward. But yeah, I just think there's way too much we don't know yet to have a definitive, but it doesn't make me not want to get it. Like I know I'm going to be in line for that thing. So
Yeah, I would agree on hot. I mean, that's one thing I've been stuck on since the beginning. I feel like I've asked you, Jayatri, 100 times already. But, just that the flu has a different vaccine every year, and, the scientific process of finding the, what the right formula is each year is pretty fascinating. So obviously, since we don't know, you can't say whether it's true or false, right? And it doesn't seem bad. Just seems like we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a hot topic of conversation right now. Everything you said was absolutely right. And again, I see you thinking about, where you have related knowledge to try and assess this. You're both thinking about the flu vaccine, what that means. And that's a great way to process information. And I would recommend going then one step further to think about and learn about how this virus is similar in some ways to flu and where it's not so similar to flu, and what that means in terms of what we might expect. So far, some good news is that based on what scientists are learning about the mutation rate of the coronavirus, or the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it seems to me does not mutate as fast as the flu virus does. So that's giving people some hope that when there is a vaccine, that it might be effective for longer than a year to year time frame. But what we don't know is also that vaccines have different levels of effectiveness. There's so much we don't know about, what kind of immunity people develop after they've been infected, what kind of immunity they develop after getting a vaccine. So absolutely, there's a lot of questions that are out there that we'll need to understand, but none of that is slowing down the progress towards a vaccine. So even if a vaccine might not last forever, you might have to get boosters, or the vaccine or the virus might change. Right now, it's all hands on deck just to get that first vaccine out, and just try and get that level of protection out there, because that's really what's going to make a difference in slowing the spread of this virus on a global scale.
definitely.
So we've talked about not just some facts and ideas about COVID, but we've also thought about where these ideas are coming from, and the strategies, and the information that you're pulling in from your experience to evaluate all of this information. So what advice would you give to your friends and family?
Oh my goodness.
That's a tough one, because I'm not usually thinking that people are like out to get me and the information that they're giving me. So I think like assessing the motives is an interesting new, kind of way to think about certain things. But I think my advice to my friends and family would be to listen to different sources, so that you can start to maybe pick out which ones seem, maybe seem a little bit more trusted, or maybe seem a little bit less trustworthy. And I also think that it's been hard, obviously, but it doesn't, to be as unselfish as you can be. And, the only thing that hurts is when I forget my mask, and then I get outside and I'm like, oh, I got to go back inside and, and get it. But, I think we just have to keep paying attention. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that.
No, but I think, the point that you made is, in the absence of, being able to, collect the evidence yourself, like we talked about, with the pollen, is that at least, being mindful to think about where you're getting information from and cross-checking information for yourself. That's a great way to make sure you're getting a variety of perspectives to evaluate the information.
Yeah, I would agree. And sorry, I echo everything that Kelly just said. And I also, something that I've learned recently that is equally interesting and almost comforting at times is just really assessing where the knowledge is coming from. And most importantly, taking a look at what the claims, as I said before, are. There have been articles that I've read where they've referenced scientific studies, and up until working for the Franklin Institute, I took that at face value and was like, well, scientific study, it's there, right? And I've since learned that there's so many nuances to those. And if it's an appropriate and paper, then it'll take you to that study. And there's a difference between studies that have hundreds of thousands of people or 80 in Europe. And knowing that, there are just ideas and reactions that run then from those small studies. Any study gives you the idea of, okay, well, is this credible? Should I be freaking out about this? Oh, they literally talked to 10 people in Europe. Let's give it a minute. Let's see where this goes. So that's been kind of nice to learn how to do that, because it does actually give you, whether found it or not, almost a sense of security, in the sense of like, okay, I don't think that I need to freak out right now about this article because I don't think this is as credible as it could be. But as Kelly said, look at other sources, what other people are saying about it. Have other people been quoted in it? Who are they? Where are they from? So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort to look at what we're reading and to assess it and to see if it's valid. But it's really important too, because the more we know that's factual and correct, the easier it is to get out of all this. So
Katie, that's next level, right?
Well,
go ahead, Katie. Yeah,
I was gonna say, if I could, and I won't because you would kill me, I would obviously recommend everybody, who has insomnia and thinks crazy questions in the middle of the night, emails you like I do when I'm unsure about the claim and the source.
Actually, is great for that.
We are equipping people to find your own answers. And Katie, you really described that, even though it can take work, that, what we're realizing right now is that science is just churning at such a fast pace that some of the things, of the processes that we've taken for granted are being upended in ways that are both good and bad. And so whether it's looking at, the body of evidence as it's changing, or any particular study to look at, exactly how it was done, if we can be smarter consumers of science, then I think that benefits everybody. And hopefully that's a lesson that will last long beyond this particular moment.
Very important. Yes, agreed.
So thank you both for modeling that process, and how you don't have to be a scientist to be thinking about this, and the importance of doing it, and then sharing those practices with the people That's great.
Do we know
not a scientist? No, I'm sorry.
Do we know who won? Which one of us won? Let's get down to what's really important.
It's not about keeping score.
Bummer.
I should have erased my whiteboard and started doing tick marks. but everybody wins because we're all better scientific thinkers. How's that?
Yay!
Okay.
All right. Hopefully that's true for all of you who joined us out there today too. Thanks again, and we'll be back next week. Bye.